Okay, today we're talking about a huge story that's unfolding right now in a tiny, but incredibly important country. We're going inside the Panama Canal crisis. And really, this is the big question, isn't it? What happens when one of the most critical arteries for global trade just starts to run dry? It sounds like something out of a movie, but it's happening. So let's break it down.
All right, first up, a global traffic jam. Let's just try to get a handle on the sheer scale of what we're looking at here.
6%. That's how much of all global maritime trade goes through the Panama Canal. Now, that number might not sound huge at first, but trust me, in our totally interconnected world, that is a massive, massive choke point.
And here's why it matters so much. For more than 100 years, this canal has been the ultimate shortcut. It connects the world's two biggest oceans, and it saves ships from having to take that super long, super dangerous trip all the way around South America. It's an absolute marvel of engineering that changed everything about global trade.
What's pretty wild is just how fast this all happened. It wasn't some slow-motion disaster. It started with a little less rain, then boom, by 2023, they're already putting restrictions on ships. And now, we're in the middle of a full-blown drought with major, ongoing disruptions. It escalated fast.
So, you might be wondering, how can a canal surrounded by two of the world's biggest oceans be so worried about a lack of rain? That's a great question, and it brings us to our next section, the canal's thirst explained.
The secret is in its design, which is brilliant, but also incredibly thirsty. See, the Panama Canal isn't just a big ditch. It's this complex system of locks. The best way to think about it is like a giant water elevator that literally lifts these enormous ships up and over the mountains of Panama.
So here's how that elevator works. A ship pulls into a lock. The lock fills up with fresh water from a nearby lake, which lifts the ship up. Then it moves to the next lock, and the whole thing repeats. But, and this is the key part, once the ship is through, all that fresh water just gets dumped into the ocean. It's a one-way trip for the water.
So how much water are we talking about? 50 million gallons. That's the amount of fresh water that gets flushed out to sea for just one ship to pass through. Now think about the dozens of ships a day that used to go through. You can start to see why this thing has such a massive thirst.
Right? With that kind of demand, you can see how a problem could pop up pretty easily. And that brings us right to Section 3, why the water ran out. The main culprit here is a really nasty, long-lasting drought. Scientists have linked it pretty strongly to the El Niño climate pattern. So you have way less rain falling than usual. And those giant lakes that act as the canal's fuel tanks, well, they're just not getting filled back up.
And the impact of that is felt everywhere. I mean, it starts with the Panama Canal Authority, the guys on the ground managing this, but it immediately spreads to the huge shipping companies, to major trading partners like the US and China, and to global markets for, well, everything. And believe it or not, it eventually trickles all the way down to you. We'll get to how in just a second.
Yeah, a local drought in Panama doesn't stay local for long. It sends out this huge ripple effect that's felt all over the world. So let's trace those ripples. This chart tells the story pretty clearly. On the left, you've got your normal shipping costs before the drought, and on the right, the costs during the drought. It's basic supply and demand, right? There are way fewer spots for ships to get through, so the competition is fierce, and the price to get one of those spots has just gone through the roof.
And those high costs are really just the beginning. The whole thing cascades. You get major shipping delays, supply chains become a total mess, and ships have to take these enormous detours. And what does all that lead to? Well, it can lead to higher prices for all of us, on everything from our phones to our cars, pretty much any goods that travel by sea.
So, this whole situation is forcing the entire shipping industry to basically improvise, which leads us to our last section, navigating the new normal.
So what do you do if you can't get through the canal? Well, the alternatives are not great. You can reroute through the Suez Canal, but that adds a whole lot of time and money, especially if you're going from Asia to the U.S. East Coast. The other option? Go all the way around South America, the original journey the canal was built to replace. We're talking weeks of extra time and burning a ton more fuel.
When we look ahead, there are a few ways this could play out. In the short term, if this drought keeps up, the restrictions are going to stick around. In the medium term, you can bet we're going to see huge investments in new ways to manage water. But the long-term question is the big one. Could this be the start of permanent changes to the trade routes that have been locked in for a century?
And that really brings us to the final critical question. Is this giant global traffic jam just a temporary problem, a fluke caused by some bad weather? Or is this a preview of what's to come?
Is this the new, very real price we're all going to pay as climate change starts to mess with our most important infrastructure? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.